All right. So the typical project that would need frogging can be small, can be something small, a sock, a hat, a shawl even, or it can be large like a sweater, a multi-piece, many, many thousands of stitches type project. So we do these things in the company of those who understand. Hi, Louise. Welcome to the Frog Pond Party. It's lovely to have you. Just chatting about when we frog, and we can also talk about why we frog. I am going to show you all in just a little bit what project I've decided to undo today. Hey, hey, Denise. Hello, my lovely friend. Welcome, welcome. Hello to everyone joining. Hey, Mari. I'm doing well, thank you. I hope you're also doing well. I'm using a streaming service that allows me to see your chats a little bit more slowly so I can respond. Hey, Stella Knits, welcome. Ready for the Frog Pond Party? Yes, Leanne. Washing our hands, keeping those hands clean. I'm really excited that we have a way to continue connecting during this pandemic time. Today's party, again, is a little bit different than our last party. The last party, I had confetti. We were swatching and we were starting something and we were celebrating. Today, I don't have confetti with me, but I did bring my party hair. You know, dressing up is all relative now. Dressing up to go from my bedroom to my craft room. It's a big event. Hey, Yana. I am very excited to have some company for doing this. So I was talking a little bit before some of you may have joined. I was talking about why we frog. We frog projects that are not meeting our expectations or are just in need of a do-over. A frogging is a way we give ourselves a do-over. I can see your chats coming in, and I'm going to send a chat back to all of you. Hey, Ramona! Oh, that's so good. You just found an end in your project so you can frog without cutting anything? Excellent. We'll talk a little bit about some of the different methods of frogging. All right. You'll forgive me as I swipe screens and whatnot. I just want to make sure that I can keep seeing what everyone is typing. Thank you, Denise. Thank you. Hey, Chantal. So, how many of you have brought projects with you to undo? We're going to rip it together today. Who's undoing and what are you undoing? Hey, from North Carolina, Snickerdoodle Knits. It's great having you. One of my active subscribers. I love having you here. I just keep looking down because in a minute I'm going to share with you what I'm frogging. It's not a secret or anything. I'm just getting it to a point where I can share what it looks like. Yes. Okay, so let's talk about why we frog or undo. And this is something that can be on a small scale. Again, it can be a swatch, it could be a small project, or a larger scale. So let's say you have gone through swatching, which I advocate for swatching and getting your measurements before beginning your project. Hi, Kimberly from Jacksonville. Hello, Florida Knitters. Whoop, whoop. What's up, David? David Dog Dares here. Hi, Danielle. Welcome in, everybody. So let's say you did a swatch for your project. I refer to knitting projects and crochet projects interchangeably here. So you did a swatch, you got your measurements, you launched into your project, very excited to keep going, and you start the project and you're going through gangbusters, but the swatch lied. I mean, that's what we do. We blame it on the swatch. The swatch lied. The measurements that you're getting in your actual project are not matching what you were getting in your swatch, and you may need to frog and start over. So Mara's undoing the first 13 inches of a bottom-up sweater, so that's over a foot's worth of knitting. Mara, we are with you. So if your swatch and your actual project don't match, absolutely, that would be a case in which you may frog back that project. Whether or not you start again, I guess, depends on your frustration level with that mismatch. Who else is frogging? Hey, Deanna, welcome. If at any time you jump on and you tell me your name or I see your name and I mispronounce it, Zenobi, welcome from Germany. please feel free to put the phonetic spelling into the chat. I won't be insulted. It would mean a lot to me to pronounce your name properly. My full name is Marceline, Marceline, and pronounced phonetically, it is not Marceline, Marceline, Marceline. I get all kinds, so it matters to me to pronounce your name properly. Other reasons that we frog. So I've come across this instance from my own projects. Chantel's ripping out a shawl design that she started 2 years ago that didn't pan out. Don't worry about joining us just for a few minutes, Chantel. It's great to have you here while you can be here. I hope work goes well for you today. So the other instance in which I frogged is also for formerly finished objects, FFOs, a project where there really wasn't something wrong necessarily, but I realized after the project has sat in my closet or in a cupboard for a long time that I'm not wearing it or using it, or I just don't enjoy it the way I thought I would. And in many cases, if I can get the yarn back by frogging, I have done that. Oh, Mari, thank you so much. That's so sweet. Louise Ann is frogging because she realizes she hasn't got the body shape or clothing for a cute cropped cardie. Yes. Okay, so the project maybe didn't go wrong. No measurement issues. But again, just whether or not you're going to wear it or use it the way you thought, it doesn't work out. I think that's a good reason, especially if you love the yarn. Chantel, you're knitting a shawl. That's excellent. Shawl knitting is so soothing. And just a shameless self-promotion here, my friend Natalie and I are running a stash dive challenge. And this quarter, second quarter of the year, the category of focus is shawls, Chantel. So join us in the stash dive challenge if you like. So Leanne Warnier, it is just gone 12 noon for us, just about midday for me here in the southeastern U.S. Mara. I hope I'm getting that right, Mara. Your swatches are pathological. Yes, you're finding that your knitting and your swatch do not agree. That's tough. That is really rough because you did the right thing. You started off correctly. Yeah. And I think if you're frogging to reclaim the yarn, sometimes that can be a little easier to deal with, I guess I would say. I feel like there's always a bit of disappointment, maybe a feeling of a bit of letdown whenever you're undoing. But I do have friends who have the opposite philosophy. They feel like all making time is good time. So if you are undoing with good reason and by choice, you just get that much more time to knit or crochet again if you plan to start over. Oh, in the Netherlands, you're already in the evening. Yep, you're about 6 hours ahead of us. Just about dinner time. I hope it's a winding down time for you and the end of a peaceful Friday. So I'm going to show you the kind of frogging that I'm doing, which is a third type. And the project in question is this sweater. Let me back up a little bit. This is a simple pullover sweater. It has a turned over ribbed collar. It's got some color blocking in it, 3 different colors of yarn. Komikon says they've got several whips that are on the verge of being frogged. Pull one out and rip it with us. This pullover sweater is being frogged because I did not knit it. I actually purchased it from a thrift store, a charity shop, a secondhand store. And this is something I've done a few times in the past. Often I will go to the thrift shop and look for sweaters that I know to be handmade, and I'll show you how I can tell. Handmade sweaters, and preferably sweaters that at least appear to have animal fiber content. It is a really inexpensive way to get some nice yarn, and if you're willing to go through the process of undoing it, it's pretty economical. This sweater cost me probably $3 US and change. It's too small for me, and I knew that when I bought it because I bought it with the intention of frogging it. Oh, Leanne's having homemade pizza. I love that, Leanne. I'm joining you in that cozy feeling. Denise, I'll see you another time, sweetheart. I'm really glad you were here. Thank you. Mwah. Good to see you. So the ideal sweater to frog in this scenario where you've taken a thrift store sweater is one that's handmade for a couple of reasons. A handmade sweater is most likely to allow you to rip it back and not lose much yarn. Machine-made sweaters are typically created in pieces and then their seams are serged together. And so if you were to undo the seams in a machine-made sweater, all of the yarn ends have been cut. And so what you end up with, especially in a knit, machine knit sweater or a machine knit item, is a lot of individual strands that have had their ends cut in order to seam them. Hope that makes sense. Hello from Vermont, Alyssa. Ooh, you're drinking some tea and you have a sweater to frog? Fantastic. You're in the right place. It's a frog prawn party. This sweater is one that I brought home, and because I like to get this inexpensive method of reclaiming wool yarn, I do test it. If you Google burn test for fiber, there are tests that you can do to actually light a bit of the fiber. Here's some yarn that came from this sweater. To light a bit of the fiber just with a match or a lighter, and based on the way it burns, the smell, the kind of ash it creates, how the fiber reacts to the flame, you can tell if there is animal fiber in the yarn you're using. Animal fiber, protein fibers, and plastics and synthetics have some very specific burn patterns. Hello, Erica from South Africa. Hello, hello. One of my lovely subscribers. It's great having you here. So the burn test told me that this is definitely an animal fiber. I could kind of tell, if I bring this close, you can see that there's a good halo on this. I could kind of tell that there was some animal fiber in here just from the feel. It's a handmade sweater. There was no tag on the inside to indicate fiber content, not surprising. And what I want to do is get these beautiful yarns out of it. Yes, so Mara, when you look at a sweater, let's take a look at this together. When you look at a sweater and you're not sure how it was put together and whether or not you can rescue the yarn from it, a good thing to do is to look at the seams. So if I turn this inside out and I look at the seams on this sweater, hopefully what you can see is that there's a line of seaming here between the front and the back body. If I look at the sleeves, inside out. Oh, it's great to have you here, Erica. Thanks for joining. What time is it in South Africa right now where you are? So the inside of the sleeve has a similar seaming pattern. And now this is recognizable to me because I've done this before, the unseaming of a thrift store sweater. But what I can tell here is that the seaming is a bit uneven. It is not all evenly serged. There isn't a thread running through the entire seam that looks more like sewing thread. One of the clues in a machine knit sweater is that the thread they use to serge the seams together does not look like yarn typically. It looks like the kind of thread you'd get on a sewing machine. And so if you see that kind of serger seam, you know that if you were to snip that, you're going to end up with cut threads. Oh, early evening, Erica. Okay, great. Hello from Ohio, Lynn and Lake Erie. You wanted to hear my voice of calm while the winds howl. I'm honored. You're knitting some and enjoying some time. Okay, thank you so much for being here. A howly, windy day does make you want to just hunker down, doesn't it? So a couple of tools that I use, which may be helpful to you depending on what you're frogging. First thing, frogging. Sometimes it's a good idea to snip. So when I looked at the seams of this sweater, what I realized is that the pieces were whip stitched together. If you're familiar with seaming in knit projects, you can do a mattress stitch where you do a very even kind of almost like a sewing method to go from one side to the other and join them. But this was done in a way that is more like a whip stitch that just put the two pieces together and whip stitch them together. What that means is that along the seam, there is a single thread running that's connecting the two sides. So my other favorite frogging tool is a crochet hook. It can be a lot easier to get in between stitches, to get under a seaming thread, to pull out yarns that you've woven in using a crochet hook. It's just more convenient than picking at it with your hands. Hello from Hamburg, Germany. Mika, please pronounce your name for me phonetically, if you don't mind. It's so great having you. So what I'm doing so far is I'm starting with the sleeve. The way this sweater was constructed is the sleeve was knit flat. I know that because it had a seam. And then it was whip stitched to the body. And in order to get the yarn, I'm going to start with the sleeve. So I've already unpicked the seam in this sleeve. Now, using my crochet hook again, I have been able to go down the seam and just pick out that thread that was used to whip stitch. I'm going to see if I can do a little bit of this and then turn my camera so you can see. Okay, Chantal, I hope work goes great for you today. Thanks for being here. So if you look down here, here is the seaming thread that I'm using my crochet hook to pull out, and as I pull it out, the two sides are coming apart. Fairly straightforward. So my frogging for this thrifted sweater is probably a little bit more, there are probably a few more steps here than for those of you who are undoing your own knitting. You know exactly where you bound off or how you seamed, and so it might be easier for you to figure that out. For me, this is more of a puzzle, which I actually find interesting to determine how the knitter created this project. In fact, one of the things that was interesting to me about the neckline is it's a folded over neckline. So they've done some ribbing and folded over the neckline at the top. And it looks to me like they've done a crochet seam to attach the neckline. So I'm going to figure that out. Mika, what are you frogging? Are you frogging something along with us? Ramona, how's the weather where you are? Is it stormy? I realize that quite a few areas of North America are having what feels to me like some pretty late snowstorms and heavy weather. So once I get to the point that, for example, this sleeve has been opened up and it's a flat piece of knitting, I'll be able to grab an end from where the knitting began and start ripping it out. Now, my intention is to reclaim this yarn, so I know when knitting has sat for a while, the yarn gets pretty kinky, and I prefer not to start using it again until I have relaxed it. So I'm going to want to soak this. If I soak this in some lukewarm water and let it sit for a while, some of that curl will come out. And the easiest way for me to do that is to take the yarn that I'm frogging from here and make it into a skein. Anyone recognize this tool? This is a nitty knotty. It has a shaft, two arms I call them, that are perpendicular to each other. And it allows me to wind yarn strands around it and create a skein or hank. A skein is so much easier to soak. If I were to just wind this off onto my ball winder and create a cake out of it like I do when I start a project, it would definitely put some more tension back on the yarn. It wouldn't be as curly as when it first came out of the frogged item, but not enough tension for me. I want it to kind of go back to as fully a relaxed state as possible. But this is an option, especially if you're frogging something like a swatch and you're just going to start again, or you're frogging something smaller. You can definitely just attach the end to your ball winder and let that do the frogging for you rather than using your own muscle power to pull out all the strands. I have a sweater here. I made myself a little note. I've got this bag of yarn, It's a really pretty pale blue. And this is another yarn that I thrifted. So this yarn was part of a cabled sweater that I found at the thrift store, and I actually made myself a little note when I did this. Sometimes I'm so good at record keeping. Other times I wonder about myself. So in May of 2019, coming up on a year ago, I reclaimed this sweater yarn from a cabled pullover, and based on my burn test, I determined that it was 100% animal fiber, and it is 470 grams of yarn. So there's this, and I have a few other skeins sitting over there behind the camera. So 470 grams of yarn. It's a fairly heavy weight. I would put this at a worsted weight. I mean, I knew from looking at the sweater that this would give me enough yarn to make a sweater that would fit me. The cabled sweater probably would have fit me, and because it was cables, there was quite a bit of yarn tied up in that cabling, so I'm really excited to be able to reuse this. I went through the whole process of undoing the sweater, and when you do that, you will sometimes end up with very different amounts of yarn from frogging. So I have tiny little amounts from a cuff, some smaller amounts from sleeves, some big amounts from the body, right? Yeah, so you're not necessarily going to get back one big ball, especially if the item you're frogging was pieced together. So those of you who are frogging, we've heard from a couple people why they're frogging. I would love to know if anyone else is frogging or undoing a project. What happened? Is it an unexpected frogging, or are you at the point where you kind of knew you were at a point where you might have to undo and start again? I do find that when I'm working on larger projects, there's almost always this point that something is not quite going right. Often it has to do with sizing, and for whatever reason, call it stubborn, I push through anyway, and I keep going, or I tell myself, oh, I can fudge it. Oh, it's not that bad. I'm probably overthinking it, and I just keep going. And then when it comes to the end of the project and the fit isn't right, or that one sticking point comes back to bite me, I have no one else to blame, but I still get mad and I'm still disappointed. So I know at some point during a project when it's not going to last, and it usually just comes down to whether or not I undo it right away or not. It is a good day for this because I have a good amount of light coming in to my craft room. It's allowing me to see really well what I am pulling out here. I'm just using my crochet hook, and because I've identified the seaming strand, it lets me just pull out that strand. I have knit projects in particular before where I was so meticulous about weaving in the ends that it is near to impossible to find my cast off point and where I've woven in the ends, especially on yarns with a lot of halo. If I've worn the item over time, that wear and friction can really hide the end. That's happened to me with socks and sweaters, and I struggle to find the end. Sometimes if you're really willing to sacrifice a bit of yarn, you can certainly cut a piece of your project. For example, the ribbing on a sleeve cuff or the hem on a body. You can cut it, and then I have done that to make it easier to just reclaim the rest of the yarn. Just do a little message here. And make sure you guys can still hear me. So one of the positive things, let's see. I'm just checking the chat to make sure I haven't missed anything. All right. I see that there are several of you still out there. So if you can, someone send me a chat and let me know that you can still hear me. I want to make sure that we're all good in terms of chat. Okay. This is my first time using this particular streaming service, so I just always helps to double check, right? So yeah, a positive spin on frogging is getting the yarn back. Now, if, as one of our friends said earlier, if you're not happy with the way a project came out, but you're still in love with the yarn, frogging is a great way to get back to that and to get back the yarn from that project and potentially use it for something else, or donate it or trade it out of your stash and be done with that yarn for that time. Okay, so I'm getting to the point now on undoing this sleeve where it's coming close to where it joined at the shoulder. So at some point when I have released the final seaming strand, I will be able to remove the sleeve as one piece, and then I can work on frogging the yarn out of that sleeve. Yeah. So I haven't seen any chats, but I'm going to try. It's so great to have this option to connect with you all. Who knows what kind of party type we'll come up with next. Now, this, as I said earlier, is a really inexpensive way for me to get some yarn. But even if it were a project that I made myself, and I think about frogging something that didn't work out and then reusing it for something else, it's like I'm increasing the value of that yarn. You know, it had all of the wonderful knitting time involved that the original project gave me, or crochet time, and whatever I enjoyed about the project at the time, I still have that as part of my memory, and then I may use that yarn in something that will give me even more pleasure and might even be better than what I originally intended. And to me, that gives the yarn just some extra value. It just makes it that much more special. Now, using this crochet hook, I have to tell you, it makes this go so much faster. I know that not everyone crochets. If you're a knitter, you might not also crochet, but I have to say it is one of the most useful tools to have. This is just a 3.5 millimeter E-size crochet hook from Clover, and I use it for picking up stitches. I use it for something like this where I just need to grab an end. I use it sometimes for casting on, a provisional cast on. It's such a handy tool, and it's called a crochet hook, but it's not just for crochet projects, I find. It's really convenient if you have one of the miniature ones too that can sit in a notions pouch, something small. It's great. I love it. So I'm not seeing any more chat, and I'm afraid that I'm missing messages with you all. We've been partying hard for about half an hour, and what I'm going to do is end this live and then restart it in the hopes that I can start seeing your chat messages again, just in case something's happening with the software. I will end this here, and for those of you who are not able to rejoin, or those of you who are joining from the replay, I hope that you're enjoying reclaiming your yarn and feeling really good about it. Okay. I may see you again soon. Hello, friends. I'm rejoining because my software required that I restart so I could see your chats, and that means I need to catch up. Thank you all so much for still being here. I see that there's still several of you frogging along with us. I really appreciate you hanging out. I wasn't able to see your chat, and I don't want to miss any questions you might have or what you're sharing with us. So, Deanna, you had asked earlier, when you're frogging, does the yarn lose some of its body? And I think you might mean sort of the heft of the yarn. It can in the original frogged state. So this yarn that I frog from a sweater has been really compressed by the knitting and being in the garment. But usually when I soak it, it comes back to life. The yarn that I got from the thrift store, it really, to me, looks like it was in the original skein. It's still got all that life and body to it. I soak it, and a lot of times once I've soaked it, it's relaxed enough, but if it's not, I will put it on a hanger and hang something like a spray cleaner bottle on the skein to weight it down, because as you know, animal fibers, especially when they're wet and you put them in a shape like hanging them, they will keep that shape, so I weight them. Mikey, thank you. I see that your name is Mikey, and I'm so happy to have you here. Thanks for that. Hey Ramona, it's sunny but windy and cooler today and not snowing. I'm sure you're happy about the not snowing part, because some parts of Canada are getting quite a layer right now. So Erica's knitting a jersey she designed for her daughter, and you have to frog the first sleeve. The increases didn't work out. In the design process, frogging back is so common. So Comey says, in Florida, you're having a cool day in the 70s. We are so grateful for cooler days here in Florida. I'm in South Florida, and we had already hit temperatures of 90 Fahrenheit last week. Hey, Pukvosen. I hope you're having a wonderful, wonderful Friday in the Netherlands. I love having you here. So I'm really glad that you guys are feeling supported in frogging. We've talked about all the reasons why. Okay, Mara, I'm not steeking. Just to clear this up, I wasn't using my scissors for steeking. I was actually just cutting the seaming thread, and that just made it a lot easier for me. Once I made an initial snip of the seaming thread down at the bottom, it made it a lot easier for me to start undoing that seam and getting the pieces out. Hope that helps. So Erica says she's never bought a jersey at a thrift store and frogged it, but she should try it once you're let out of your jails. Yes, after quarantine and lockdown is over, I know I'll be looking for ways to keep saving money. It's just, to me, another way of giving wool a second or third life, you know. Hello, Uhura Parks from New Jersey. Nice to see you. And Susan's here from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Wonderful. Hey, Alyssa, thanks for hanging on. So, Ramona, you thought you'd be a little upset at having it pulled out, but you're not. So it was the right decision. Oh, that's so good. That's a good feeling. When you don't regret it after the frogging, that is a really good feeling. Yeah. Yes, crochet hooks are great for fixing drop stitches as well. Yeah, I agree. Hello, I'm back. It's just hard for me when I can't see your messages. I want to be able to interact with you as much as possible, so I'm glad I could get back on. This is another seaming thread that came out. Yes. So the blanket that you have going, Comey, am I saying that right, Comey? Why are you pulling it out? Tell me again in case you told me before. Mike is undoing a blue pullover. Okay, excellent. What's going on with the pullover? I'm undoing a pullover as well, but it wasn't my knit, so I guess I'm a little less attached to the knitting itself. I'm invested in getting this yarn. Yeah, to get a sweater for a few dollars and then get a good value out of it, I think is fantastic. I was talking before about my nitty naughty. Now, certainly I love to give suggestions for doing things without necessarily having tools. Mikey doesn't like the fit of the pullover, but the yarn is great. Okay, excellent reason to frog. If you don't have something like this Nitty Naughty at your disposal, I tend to just wrap yarn over my thumb, between my thumb and index finger, and under my elbow. If you can imagine me just wrapping some yarn. Let's see what I have here. I was looking to see if I have just a stray strand of yarn, but if I were to take some yarn and wrap it over my thumb and then under my elbow and keep doing that, I get the shape of a hank that I can then tie off in a couple of places and soak. So if you're frogging and you don't have a Nitty Naughty or a ball winder handy, that's another option. Louise Ann says it's taken 18 months to get to the point where you've admitted that the planned cardigan wasn't right and you're happy to frog. The projects do have to sit in timeout for a little bit sometimes, or a lot of it. It's not a bad thing. I think at whatever point you can come to the decision and feel good about it is okay. I would say that if the yarn has been sitting in that project for a long time, like a year, it's definitely going to have some kinks in it, and so it will probably need a good soak in order to rescue the yarn. It's great knowing that something so simple can connect us all, isn't it? We're chatting now and connecting from all over the world, and yet as makers we have these common scenarios. We're doers and sometimes we're undoers, and that's okay too. Now, as I'm undoing this pullover, it's really interesting to me the construction of this sweater. There are many, many patterns out there for sweaters and so many different ways to construct a garment. And undoing this one has given me a view into how the knitter originally constructed it. It was all done in pieces. I can tell that the pieces were knit flat, and just by looking at it, they didn't do kind of the common slip the first stitch edge. It's just a very simple stockinette knit without any edge treatment. And almost all of the seaming was done as a whip stitch, even along the shoulder seam, which is really interesting. I haven't seen that before. Now, for my preference, that whip stitch, which is showing up on the right side, front side of the sweater, is a bit bulky. I like mattress stitch if I'm putting together a seamed sweater because it is an invisible seam. But I do have some sweaters where I've done a 3-needle bind off or a crochet bind off to intentionally show a textured seam, and I think that's cool too. Hi, Kimberly. Oh, your son came up with your username. Okay, cool. You're frogging the blanket because the stitch pattern and the size is not working, and you even tried another stitch pattern. But if you love the yarn, you're thinking you'll give it another go, or maybe you'll just let the yarn sit for a while and think about what it wants to become. That's also okay. I have read in a couple different places that if you are going to put yarn away for some time, it is good to store it in the skein format instead of in the ball format. And my understanding from what I've read is that the skein format is very tidy for storage, but it tends to allow the yarn to be in a little bit more of a relaxed state. Whereas if you've caked it up, if you've made a yarn cake out of it, I don't have a yarn cake easily handy, but most of you know what a yarn cake looks like that's done on a ball winder. That's under a bit of tension. Hello, Marva. And you don't necessarily want to store your yarn under tension. That could affect how it looks once you've started working with it, actually. So just a hot tip, if you are going to put your yarn away for a while, it's better to store it as a skein. So the other thing I'm noticing about the construction of this sweater is this knitter had some really nice gauge in their knitting. They had a pretty good tension in their knitting. Come on in. You're welcome to visit if you like. I mean, it's all pretty even and neat. My husband is over there. You all can't see him. He just poked his head in. Come say hi. All right, well, he's blowing kisses to you. He's shy to be on camera. Okay, Ramona, you're going directly to your Swift to save yourself a step. Okay, that's a great idea, and it's fast. When you do it that way, it's really fast. The ball winder does a lot of the physical work too, so that can work well. Oh, Marva, thank you so much. That's really sweet. I appreciate that. Marva says she loves my work, and I really appreciate that. Now, I am losing a bit of yarn in this process only because all the seaming yarn are separate little bits. Totally okay with that. Well, Kimberly, it's okay if it sits for a bit. So one of the things that frogging does for me too is it helps me to reevaluate my own taste. As I'm frogging something, I am also considering why didn't it work out? Is this the right kind of project for this yarn? Sometimes I'm even thinking, could some of this yarn be used with something else from my stash? So it sometimes helps me to refocus. It's a gut check moment about the yarn. I have frogged projects and come to the decision that I don't like the yarn anymore either. And so I may find a way to destash it or trade it with someone. Tastes change over time, don't they? And even the types of projects that you're making could be very different now than when you originally began. So you celebrate the fact that you get it back, but that also doesn't mean you still have to keep it. I find that online, especially on Ravelry, for example, there's so many groups where you can destash and trade yarns. A yarn that's coming from someone else in a trade or a destash, it's new to you and maybe a better fit for your current taste, which is cool too. Can you guys hear that frogging sound? Rip it, rip it. I'm really grateful that the seaming in here was so obvious. It's making it really easy. Frogging is not always the most fun based on the yarn type. I'm thinking about this now as I go through this process with my crochet hook, and I'm feeling pretty thankful that whatever blend is in here, I think it could be alpaca and wool. It could even be a mohair potentially, or even an angora, just based on the halo and the softness. I know that this is not likely to be just a pure wool. It's likely to be a wool plus something that has some pretty heavily hairy content. And I'm pretty happy that I'm able to pull these strands apart. Sometimes if you have a yarn with a lot of halo, undoing can be a nightmare. All those hairs and all that halo makes the yarn want to stick together, and it makes it really difficult to separate it out. I don't know any magic tricks for that particular scenario, unfortunately. It's one of those things where, tough decisions must be made. I think that if something was too challenging to undo and I knew I wasn't going to like it and I knew I was done with it, I would probably be looking for a way to give away the whole project to someone if it's a garment or a shawl. Okay, Mara says it's a bit painful. You've cast on again on larger needles. It's a slow poke knit along, but you're back to shaping near the beginning and you're sad about the thought that went into it. Oh dear. Oh dear. Okay, we're sending you some love and some cheer and some sunshine because it's not always a fun process. So you're part of a slow poke knit along. I mean, give yourself some patience. Be patient with yourself. Starting over it can be emotional. But if it's what the name sounds like, give yourself some time and some patience to get to a point where you're enjoying it again. If you're working on heavy yarn and big needles, you can kind of see the effect pretty quickly. Well, this is great. I'm very thankful for the company because this sweater, I bought it at the same time that I bought the blue one from the yarn I showed you. So it's been in my craft room for a year. I took enough of a look at it at first to know that it was going to be something I could unpick and rescue the yarn. And then I just put it down. So the next thing, once I've frogged this, is to think about what I'm going to want to do with this yarn. So Kim says she's only been knitting seriously for a year, a small stash of yarn, mostly acrylic. You have begun to notice you want to move on to new fiber types. All right. Well, if you have a small stash now and a desire to try new fibers, there's so many great ways to do that, which hopefully you won't find overwhelming. I find the Ravelry database has a lot of great information on yarns, and not just their content, but also how people feel about the yarn and what they've used it for. That's a fun way to window shop, if you will, and figure out what types of yarn might work for you. Bonjour, Joanne. Bienvenue. You're in Quebec and there's 5 inches of wet and soggy snow. Ugh. Are you frogging or making to soothe yourself? I just feel like that much snow in April is hard. Kim has just unraveled a double knit sock, a Lucy Neatby pattern. I'm a huge fan of Lucy Neatby. You're going to knit Kate's shawl from Cozy Up Knits. I love the Cozy Up Knits sisters. They are so entertaining. The Cozy Up Knits podcast is a really fun one to watch. 4 sisters who are knitters from Canada. Makers, I should say. They don't only knit. So you're going to make a shawl out of what was a double knit sock. So because it was a double knit sock, Kim, I'm assuming you had a good amount of yardage in there. What made you choose to unravel the sock? Inquiring minds want to know. Kimberly, Comicom, are there any specific fiber types that you have your eye on? Guys, I'm getting so close to separating this piece. Look. This is the sleeve. So I was able to open up the sleeve seam. You can see where it was knit flat. And now, hello, I'm separating it from the shoulder. And that's the way I'll work. I'll work in pieces. Once this sleeve is off, I will unravel the yarn from it first before I tackle the rest of the sweater. Of course, you could just get all of your pieces separated, and if you wanted specifically to get a bunch of, say, all of this color yarn into a skein and all of this color into a skein, you could do that as well. I'm not going to be that particular. I'm totally okay with smaller bits. This is an animal fiber, which means I can wet felt or spit splice strands together if I want one continuous skein. I'm not really going to worry about it until I figure out what it is I want to do with it. The animal fiber gives me a lot of options for how I can join it together. I think Snickerdoodle Knits and Kim need to have a Cozy Up shawl knit along and encourage each other. It'll be good. So those of you who are having not the greatest weather, I wonder, is that making it a little bit easier to be inside? Hopefully be comfortable. Sleeve overboard. Yay! There it is. Now what's interesting about this is I could almost reverse engineer this process. I know that this wouldn't fit me. It doesn't have enough ease in it for me. But I could look at something like this and generally figure out stitch counts and so on, and kind of reverse engineer my way into a pattern. So, adding some width to this sleeve, I could knit it again or knit with something else very similar if I wanted the same style sweater. Cashmere is a big one, and different wools. There are so many wools. It's a beautiful thing. It can also be an overwhelming thing. But you're right, there are many to try. And figuring out which one you like best is probably just going to be a process of trying different things for different projects. Sample some things. Try minis. Projects with minis would be a great way to experience different types of wools. And I'm an advocate of buying from other people's destash, so yarns that need to be rehomed. I think it's a great way to give those yarns another shot at being made into something. So if you don't want to spend a whole lot as you're trying things out, find someone who has yarn in their stash that you're interested in that's looking to sell or trade. Ah, bonjour from France. Hi, Catherine. Salut. Okay, so you have 100 grams of each color. So from Kim's sock, she's got 100 grams of each color. Okay, and you were working on it while caring for your dad, and he's better now, which is excellent. I'm very happy to hear that. And so you're going to give that yarn some new life, put some different energy into it, and I think that's fantastic. Kim's having fun knitting the Katie shawl so far, and you wanted to use the yarn. Okay, good. Oh, it's a beautiful thing when the perfect project for the yarn appears. It's pretty special. Sometimes it takes a few tries to get there. Where I am in my frogging process now, so you all know, is from what I can tell, this sleeve was knit, I think it may have been knit from the bottom up. And this is going to determine how I frog. So this is a trial and error process. You're welcome, Kimberly. No problem. Ooh, Deanna just got some cotton and cashmere to try. That's excellent. In trying to determine the direction of knitting, meaning where was the sleeve cast on and where was it bound off, it's important because if I find the spot where it was cast on and can pull that thread, all I'm going to have is a process of basically unzipping these rows, and it will be very easy. If I start trying to work from the bind off section, it's much more difficult. You have to go back stitch by stitch, threading the yarn through to get it out. Not fun, not what I'm after. So it's possible this was knit from the bottom up. If I think about sleeve construction, casting on here, increasing, and then decreasing for the armhole edges would make sense to me. I wonder if there's a way for me to look at the stitches and know for sure. If I look at these stitches and the way the stockinette V's are formed, I think this was knit bottom up. If anybody knows a trick to determining that, for sure, let me know. But I was having some trouble undoing at the top, which kind of tells me that was a bound off section. This looks like a standard bind off edge to me. So I'm going to go back to the cuff and assume that it was started there. I see a strand here that looks like it might have been woven in. And I'm going to start from the bottom and assume that that was the cast on and hope that that lets me unzip. Kimberly's at the bottom of her blanket. Frog party win. It was worth it having you here with us today to get it done. Fabulous. I love hearing that. Meanwhile, sweater deconstruction continues. Have any of you taken out a lot of your makes from the past to decide what stays and what goes? Or even your works in progress, what will be frogged and what will be finished? Catherine, you're saying look at the edges. Okay. Do you mean the top edge and the bottom edge to see what looks like a cast on edge and what looks like a bind off edge? Because that makes sense to me. It's really important that if you start from the correct end, it's a very smooth unraveling process. So I have projects that are still in progress. And at the beginning of the year, I pulled out several of them. I just laid them out. I took them out of their project bags. I put them on the floor in front of me. And I made some decisions at that point. What was going to be frogged back to its original yarn state and what I would continue working on over the course of the year. Do any of you do that? Kind of do a... You're going to do a project gut check. Okay, Mara was undoing a machine-made sock that had a lot of split stitches, so you thought it was toe up. When you stitched the ends and started from the toe, there were no more split stitches. Yep. That is a good clue. Okay. Now, I have noticed in this project, very different from me, the knitter of this project has a different finishing method. I noticed that many of the areas where you would finish, they did knots. They tied knots in the yarn. I tend to just weave in ends. So just different styles. Ramona just finished the front piece frogging. Excellent. Now to find the ends in the back piece. Ramona, was this project old enough that you had to do a bit of digging to figure out where the ends were and where to start? Chantel just gave away a bunch of shawls last fall to make room for new ones. Love that. Shawls are quite welcome, especially people who don't make them, don't knit or crochet them, tend to appreciate how functional they are. Hello, Damaris. Thanks for joining. Glad to have you here. We're frogging away. It's nice when you can rehome a garment, a shawl, a pair of socks. It gives that yarn continued life. And maybe we feel a little less bad about not keeping it for ourselves. If it's not being used by us and someone else can love on it, I think that's actually great. Now, in this process, because this is a thrifted sweater, I am 100% willing to lose a bit of yarn in the process of finding the right end and undoing it properly. You might be quite precious about a special yarn that you're trying to reclaim. So take care in the frogging process. Oh my goodness! Look at that! Damaris is Mara's mom's name. Small world. I just love that. Working on it, working on it. I love that you all are chatting with each other about your projects, because this is the community stuff that just lights me up. It's fantastic. Yeah, so I know that there'll be some casualty of yarn ends and other things as I work through here and snip and attempt to find the right ends and find the right spots to pull out a frogging yarn. Okay, so Chantel, you were able to gift your aunt a shawl, something to wrap around to hide a scar. It's fabulous. I imagine that is much appreciated. I certainly would if someone was thoughtful enough to give me a handmade item that could help in that way. I think that's great. So off camera-ish, I am just picking away at the end of this. I have to tell you that in doing this process of reclaiming yarn from thrifted sweaters, the most satisfying point is when I get the right yarn end and I can just start ripping back. Now that's because I didn't make it. So I'm not saying that ripping back and frogging is always going to be joyful. Not always, but because this is something that someone else made and I'm only interested in the yarn, I find that to be super satisfying. Weird little things, weird, simple little things that make me happy. All right, Kimberly's gaining some frogging confidence here. You've got a hat that's going to end up in the frog pile. All right, that's good. Think of all the new yarn we're giving ourselves. It's like it's new. Once you add other skeins to your stash too, I feel that your project possibilities just go up and up and up. So something that was sitting in a project might be the perfect pairing with another yarn that you just recently acquired, and then they get to live together in a project. Damaris, please tell me if I'm pronouncing your name properly. You frogged a cashmere blend sweater that you never liked a while ago. The yarn is still waiting to take on its new life. How was cashmere to frog? Did you find that challenging? I know that cashmere as a fiber is very soft, but did you find it difficult to pull back out? Any issues with the halo? Just curious. The yarn I'm working with has quite a bit of halo. What that's resulting in for me is that in some areas I have to give it a nice tug to get the strands to stop loving on each other. But that's okay. I don't mind. You guys are here keeping me company, giving me good energy, good confidence. So what I thought might have been knit from the cuff, I was wrong about that. I did try going from the cuff edge, and it turns out that that is the cast off edge. So I went back up to the top of this shoulder on this sleeve that I'm frogging and did a little more tugging and realized that the issue wasn't that I was at the wrong spot. It was that the halo was just causing the yarn to be sticky in some areas. And so now that I've been able to pull that out, so satisfying. This is the easy stuff, guys. This is the easy stuff. So it's just gone 1 o'clock. We've got a nice group going here. I'm so happy that you all had some time to join me over my lunch hour. So Damaris, it was a worsted weight and a blend in the cashmere, 20% cashmere. So you didn't have any issue with halo kind of keeping you from having a smooth frogging. I'm really glad to hear that. Just makes the whole process easier if it's not a struggle. I was talking earlier about using my Nitty Knotty as a way to make a skein so that I can soak this yarn. And I'm finally at the point where the sleeve yarn is starting to come undone. So if you haven't seen a Nitty Knotty used before, the idea is that these pegs, they're perpendicular to each other. So whereas this one right now is going straight across, left to right, this one is facing me, front to back. And you wrap the yarn around the Nitty Knotty ends. I'm just going to show a quick example. So this is the yarn that I'm frogging from my sleeve. And I just keep pulling. Every now and then it sticks, especially on the ends. I find that the place where it was seamed, it gets really fuzzy. But I just keep pulling off of the sleeve and wrapping around my Nitty Knotty. And eventually what I'll have, if I pull this off, just pull it off the Nitty Knotty. I would have tied it first. Don't try this at home without tying the skein. I get this hank shape. You see how curly it is? What I'm going to do is tie the skein at a few different places, soak it in some warm water, let it sit. It should relax back out, maybe even fluff back up. And then I'm going to make some project plans. That's the key. Thank you all so much for helping me begin this frogging process. This sweater sat here for a year waiting for me to get around to it. Hello, Hannah. Those of you just joining, I am jumping off here in a bit. I like to spend about an hour on live so that I can then upload this video to my heyBrownBerry YouTube channel and makes it so that you guys can watch it on replay and see our lovely chat. Hello, Black Ribbon Crochet Studio. Thanks for being here. We're frogging, so even if you're just joining, The subject is a frog pond party, and if you have something that needs frogging, I highly encourage you. Go for it. If you'd like, once this is up on my YouTube channel, you can replay it for company. I want to say a huge thank you to those of you who have joined me today. Go back and watch the swatch party if you're starting a project, or replay this frog party if you just want to hear the sound of my voice as you rip it back. So, oh, how funny. Ramona, it's okay. The thing about our memory, like anything, is it can only be relied upon every now and then and based on the circumstances. That's how it is for me. So I'm going to go ahead and at least get the couple of these sleeves done. I may post on my heyBrownBerry Instagram account later on once I've gotten this sweater frogged and undone. I thank you again for being here. I'm going to go ahead and end the live and encourage you all in your making process. Stay safe and cozy. I'll be thinking of you. Thank you so much for being here, guys. Bye for now.